Thank you, Peter. I don't know if you guys have helped my reputation or heard it tonight. I have a son that's a student. He's actually in the audience. I won't point him out because that's embarrassing for a 20-year-old. But I always told him that I got my MBA at the University of Iowa and never stepped foot into the library. You've ruined that for me now. I've been to the library, so. I have spent most of my career in economic development, mainly at the state level, 16 years at the Department of Economic Development, 4 years before that at a community college, and then most recently at the local level. And I really appreciate Greg's point of view because so many times organizations like his sort of demonize economic development. And I think there are good parts of economic development, and he acknowledges that, and I appreciate it. At the end of the day, communities want jobs. People want good jobs. They want businesses that pay taxes. They want employers that are good private citizens that give back to their communities. That's what makes our communities great. And it really is a competition. If we had unilateral disarmament, which I always said we should have with all the incentives that there are in the state and local level, so all the tax systems in every state was the same, every local jurisdiction had the same taxing authority, the same property tax authority, the same sales taxes, everybody had the same tax advantages, you would still have competition. And that's because a lot of what businesses are looking for, a lot of what those site locators, FANUS that you read about, are doing is they're trying to find the right location for a business to expand. That includes tax incentives, because we do have tax incentives, and we don't have unilateral disarmament, but it also includes access to water, sewer, transportation, the right workforce, telecommunications, electricity, natural gas, research and development. There are a lot of things that go into this stew that make the right site for a business to locate. I think what we need to do, given all of that, is know that economic development policy is something you really work at and have to make deliberate decisions about. And there are about 5 areas that, 5 things that I've learned over the course of my career in economic development strategy, and the things that I think you really need to pay attention to. First of all, I said I've been in economic development for about 20 years. Economic development isn't my dad's old economic development system. Back in the day, you built a spec building. Every little Iowa community did it almost. They would build a building, and they'd go find a manufacturer, and they'd say, here, I got a building, I'm going to give it to you. And that was good. I mean, everybody was happy. They had a little manufacturing plant, and everything went along fine. Well, of course, as time went along, people needed more skills, better skills in the workplace. Our workforce started to contract. The baby boomers were starting to get older. We didn't have as many people coming into the workforce. So that started to change the whole game. And I guess I was fortunate to be in economic development when we had that game change, because it was a really interesting sea change. It became about the community. Did you have a community that people wanted to live in? Did you have the attributes in that community that people wanted to have for recreation and education, and the right schools for their kids, and the right housing? And were the sewers adequate to take care of the influx of people that might come if you had a company locate there? It became much more complex than building a spec building and saying, here it is. There became all these other factors that they needed to look at to make their communities attractive. It became a very holistic economic development approach. In addition, you started seeing new things like telecommunications and advanced research and development that businesses really needed access to. So that started to change the game and mean different kinds of investments in terms of economic development. So the number one thing I learned is, you have to remain nimble and understand that the game is going to change, and businesses are going to want different things, and be future thinking in terms of what you may want in your community so that you can build the right infrastructure for economic development. Secondly, is regionalism. I used to say site locators, like the FANUS that you read about, they have a client, and their job is to weed out places. They have all sorts of people. I say, there's 300 towns in Iowa, and it's like every one of them was jumping up and down saying, hey, pick me, and you got some site locator over there in Chicago that's like, I'm trying to weed people out, and I got 50 states here, and there's 300 towns in your state, how many more towns in every other state? They're trying to take people off the list, right? And they have all these parameters on the list, from water, sewer, to access to technology, to incentives. And it's just, you know, their job's real hard. So what you really want to do is think more regionally. So if you are a town that maybe is a university town, such as Iowa City, we'll take the corridor, for example. It's a good example. If you have Iowa City and you have the university here and you have all the great R&D here, you have Cedar Rapids, which is a more industrial town, and you have the locations in between. And in the time that I've been in economic development, those two groups have come together, they've started marketing themselves together, and the reason they've done that is because together they have more to offer. They have, you can have a manufacturing kind of environment with the infrastructure of the water and sewer in Cedar Rapids. You can have access to the R&D that might happen that's needed in a progressive manufacturing facility at University of Iowa. You have these towns kind of in between that have sprung up as terrific towns to live in. North Liberty is one of the great towns we think about to live in. And you start to package all those things together and you can see that you have a lot more to offer in a region than you do in one community. And we've started thinking about economic development more that way. I always used to think we should just market the whole state. You know, the thing that gets in the way of that, the thing that always hurts us in that regard, is the fact that we still have these sort of artificial political jurisdictions. So, in other words, you still have politicians in Iowa City that want to take credit for winning a business, and Cedar Rapids has the same thing. So if Cedar Rapids wins over Iowa City, well, Iowa City can't take credit. And they don't have the tax base. So we still have these kind of strange artificial barriers to real regionalism. But if you have good leadership in your communities, they'll get past that. Thirdly, I think I learned that you always need to play to your strengths. Don't try and be something you're not. In Iowa, we have great agriculture. We're centrally located for transportation purposes. We have great R&D universities. So what do we have? We have racking and shelving tax credits, so we can have great distribution centers that want to locate here. We already have that advantage of being in the center of the United States with 80 and 35 coming through us. So let's give it that little bit more of a kicker. We don't need a big kicker. We can do a little more of a kicker, and we can really attract racking and shelving or warehousing kind of operations. We have really good, especially ag-based and health-based R&D here. So what pays really well? R&D jobs pay great. We have a great R&D tax credit. And so when I was out selling to businesses, I would say, yeah, we have an R&D tax credit. It's a substantial R&D tax credit, but it got $60,000 jobs here rather than $20,000 jobs. And that was the objective. And so play to your strengths. I guess I am not going to argue whether or not we had the strength to be a little Hollywood or not. Maybe we weren't playing to our strength with film tax credits. That might have been one of the problems there too. You're on YouTube, so I won't be very popular with some people. Fourthly, consistency. Because there's so many states, and because tax systems are so difficult to keep track of, there's all kinds of tax credits and exemptions, et cetera, et cetera. Every state has different policies. It's really hard to keep track of. Once you get policies in place that are playing to your strengths, you need to be consistent. Because if you're changing your tax policy every 2 years or every political cycle, businesses and site locators are not going to keep up with that. And you're going to throw a lot of money that you spend on marketing your strengths down a rat hole. So consistency is really important. And then at the end of the day in economic development, it is really all about the relationships. Because business retention is a much bigger piece of economic development than anybody ever acknowledges. We have great businesses here in Iowa. It's a lot easier to expand a business that's already here and help them with that. And that's about listening to those businesses that are in your community, hearing what their issues are, and making sure that you're covering your bases there. And they will expand, and we've seen great businesses in Iowa expand. So it's about keeping the relationships that we have. So those are kind of the 5 things that I learned. The economic development strategy is always changing. It's not always going to be my father's or even your father's economic development strategy. Keep up with the times. Think regionally. The more you can package together, the more you have to market. Play to your strengths. Don't try and be something you're not. Be consistent once you've got your policies together to play to your strengths. And never forget the relationships and taking care of your own. those are the 5 things I learned while I'm here. I just might want to talk about incentives just a minute. Reporting and disclosure is very important. Greg mentioned that. When I was at the Department of Economic Development, we started a process to do that. Every business that got incentives is listed on our website. I think they're continuing to do that. We're reporting every year on that, and I think that is very important. The other thing is, when you're working with incentives, again, you have to be very deliberate, and it's hard work, but you have to know your competition. You have to know what the programs are in the state that you're competing with, and you have to realize how far they can take their programs. And then you basically have to do the math of, okay, what kind of package can they put together, and never, go above where you think you need to go. You just take it to the point you think you need to take it in terms of the incentives, and before you make that offer, run a return on investment from a tax perspective. And if it doesn't offer a return, why would you do it? We started putting together a return on investment model. We brought an economist from each of the universities and a private economist together to do kind of a think tank to put together a numeric economic model on return for our incentives when I was at the department. And I hope they're still using that, and you should make sure your return's there before you make the offer. So that would be the last thing I'd leave you with.